Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. For me, it is Thursday, August the 31st, 2023, day 553 of Vladimir Putin's nightmare venture into Ukraine. And I wanted to talk to my buddy Blue Collar White Knuckles here about his comment, which is a fair point, right? The guy says, imagine how much help in the United States $100 billion in defense spending could do if reappropriated. You're not wrong, pal. And I agree with you. The Defense Department budget, which this year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's $827 billion, almost $1 trillion, right? Is bloated. And we could do some good with that money at home. It's a real problem. And I want to address some of those issues separately. Because of that, there's that other comment, right? But just on this subject alone, it is important to recognize a couple of things. First of all, the money's not all coming out in one shot. It's over years. It's allocated over years, that money. So we have like a 5-year commitment to the Ukrainians. So it's like about $20 billion a year. Still a lot of money. I'm not saying that it's not. Only it's not. And here's why. Because the vast majority of it is shit we had in the garage anyway. Paid for. Those HIMARS, they were built 30 years ago. They've been sitting in the garage. They haven't seen any use lately, not in the last 15 years at least. And we got 400 of these systems. How many of them did we send to the Ukrainians? 12. 12. So we got 400 still in the garage. And the 12 that we sent here that were built back in the 90s, specifically over concerns about war in Eastern Europe, are being used for the purpose that they were intended. Those cluster munitions, 3.5 million rounds of cluster munitions, we're never going to use them. 128 countries have banned them. We don't want to use them either, but we got them in stock. Why? Because they were manufactured in the 80s. In the 80s, dude. Right? They've been bought and paid for a million years. But when the Congress gives them away, they got to account for the cost, right? Remember a couple months ago in the Ukraine aid package, the DOD said, oh, we found an extra $6 billion. They didn't find an extra $6 billion. A bunch of old Humvees that were headed to the scrapyard that they fixed up a little bit, right? Those Humvees that were headed to the scrapyard, they counted the replacement cost of them at the full retail value of buying a new Humvee, rather than the deprecated cost for 25-year-old Humvees that had seen action in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? That was one of the items. There were other items on that list, missiles, grenade launchers, that kind of thing, that they counted the full replacement value rather than the actual depreciated value from freaking 20, 30 years ago when they were pressed. That small arms ammunition, 13 million rounds of small arms ammunition, some of that shit was pressed in the 80s. Now, look, you know as well as I do, right, because you're an American, so you probably grew up with guns. Old ammunition is good ammunition as long as it's been stored properly. Is it going to have a higher dud rate, a higher misfire rate? Maybe, slightly, if it, but it's still good ammunition for the most part, right? But you want to use the old stuff first. So we're cleaning out the garage on most of this stuff, brother. It's been bought and paid for with our tax dollars a million years ago. It looks like a lot of money on paper. And true, the humanitarian assistance that we're sending and the cash assistance that we're sending, that stuff is real money out of the budget. But the vast majority of what we are sending and what you see in the headlines is this stuff. The stuff we're just cleaning out the garage, pal. Now, you have other questions, and they're legitimate concerns, right? But do you see where I'm coming from on this point? We can afford to do this. And it's important that we do. Because if we don't, if we let Ukraine fail, how much more are we going to have to spend in the future on wars and deterrence against China and Russia? If they see us fail, if they think Afghanistan is how the U.S. handles things, we walk away, we fail, how much more are we going to have to spend in the future? I don't want to see my son drafted for a war 10 years from now. I don't want to see that. Russia's got to be defeated now. Oscar Wilde said, "A man who knows the cost of everything, but the value of nothing is a fool." Bro, I know you're no fool.